2 weeks before my wedding, I stood in front of the mirror rehearsing how to tell him I owned a $17 million company. But something in my gut told me to wait. And on the day of the wedding, when his mother walked in, clutching a notary stamp and a prenup, my silence suddenly made sense. Hey, store lover. Welcome to the Narrative Hub, Reddit Stories. Believe me, this adventure gets wild, but it's only epic with you. Seriously, you make this possible. Want more stories? Greater adventure? Smash subscribe right now. Smash like. Comment below. Let's go. Let me take you back to where this all began. Picture this, a 28-year-old woman sitting in her downtown apartment, staring at a bank notification on her phone. $17 million. Not inherited. Not won in some lottery. Built from scratch over 3 grueling years while everyone around me thought I was just playing around with some online business. The company? A specialized software platform that I developed for enterprise clients. The kind of boring, behind-the-scenes tech that makes billions but never gets talked about at dinner parties. Which was perfect, because I wasn't ready for those conversations yet. My fiancé, David, knew I had some kind of business, but he thought it was one of those cute side hustles that might bring in a few thousand a month. His family? They saw me as the girlfriend who worked odd hours on her laptop and never seemed to have a real job. The irony was delicious, if it weren't so terrifying. As our wedding approached, the questions became more frequent, more pointed. David's mother, Patricia, a woman who could smell financial instability from 3 states away, had started making comments. "I just hope she can contribute to the household," she'd whisper, not quite quietly enough. David shouldn't have to carry the financial burden alone. If only she knew that her son's future wife could buy their entire neighborhood without checking her bank balance. But here's the thing about secrets this big, they start to eat at you. Every family dinner became a minefield. Every casual conversation about money felt like walking through quicksand. I'd catch myself mid-sentence, about to mention a business trip to New York or a client meeting, then have to pivot to some made-up story about freelance work. The worst part? David was starting to worry about me. He'd see me stressed about work stuff and offer to help financially. This man, this beautiful, well-meaning man, was trying to rescue me from a financial situation that didn't exist. 3 weeks before the wedding, he sat me down for what he called a serious talk about our future. "I've been thinking," he said, holding my hands across our kitchen table. "Maybe after we're married, you could scale back the business stuff. I got that promotion, remember? I can take care of us." My heart stopped. Scale back? The business that was generating more money in a month than his annual salary? The platform that had clients lining up with million-dollar contracts? I opened my mouth to tell him everything. The words were right there. "David, I need to tell you something about my company." But something made me pause. Maybe it was the way he said, "Take care of us," like I was some damsel in distress. Maybe it was the echo of his mother's voice from countless dinner conversations. Or maybe it was pure instinct. Instead, I smiled and said, "Let's see how things go." That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, wondering if I was making the biggest mistake of my life. Was I betraying him by keeping the secret? Was I being selfish? Paranoid? The first real warning sign came during our bachelor/bachelorette party weekend. I was out with my girlfriends when my phone buzzed with an urgent client issue. While I was handling a crisis that involved a 7-figure contract, David was at his bachelor party, apparently telling his friends about his cute little entrepreneur girlfriend and how he was going to help her find something more stable after the wedding. One of his friends' wives called me the next day. "I probably shouldn't tell you this," she said, "but you should know what they're saying." My blood ran cold as she repeated the conversation. David and his friends had spent the evening discussing my failed business attempts and making jokes about how I'd probably be grateful to be a stay-at-home wife soon. Failed business attempts. This from the man I was planning to marry in 10 days. But even then, even with that pit in my stomach, I told myself I was overreacting. They didn't know the truth. How could they? I'd kept it hidden so well that their misconceptions were actually my fault. Wedding day arrived like a freight train wrapped in white silk and flowers. Everything was perfect: the venue, the dress, the weather. I felt beautiful, nervous, and still carrying this massive secret that felt heavier with each passing hour. The ceremony was scheduled for 4 p.m. At 2 p.m., I was in the bridal suite getting my makeup touched up when there was a knock at the door. "Come in," I called out, expecting my maid of honor. Instead, Patricia walked in, David's mother, carrying a folder. "Sweetheart," she said with that smile that never quite reached her eyes, "I hope you don't mind, but I brought something for you to sign before the ceremony." My blood pressure spiked. "Sign?" She opened the folder with the theatrical flair of someone who'd been planning this moment. Inside was a prenuptial agreement. Not just any prenup, a document that would have given me virtually nothing in case of divorce and established David as the sole financial decision-maker in our marriage. "It's just a formality," she said, pulling out a notary stamp like a magician revealing the final trick. "David doesn't even know." I thought it would be better coming from me, woman to woman. I stared at that document, my hands shaking. This wasn't just a prenup, it was a complete financial power grab disguised as protection. The language was so aggressive, so one-sided, that it was clear someone had done their homework about what they thought my financial situation was. Or what they thought it wasn't. "Patricia," I said slowly, "this seems pretty comprehensive for someone with no assets." Her smile flickered. "Well, you never know what the future holds. Better to be safe." That's when it hit me. She wasn't protecting David from me. She was positioning herself and David to control whatever financial success I might have in the future. The timing, 2 hours before the ceremony, wasn't coincidence. It was strategy. My mouth went completely dry. If I had told them about the company, about the $17 million, this document would have been very different. It wouldn't have been about protecting David from my nothing. It would have been about ensuring they got their hands on my everything. "I need a moment to read this," I said. "Of course, dear. But we don't have much time before the ceremony." The pressure. The artificial urgency. The assumption that I'd be so overwhelmed with wedding emotions that I'd sign anything. That's when I saw it clearly. This wasn't love. This was a setup. The test I didn't know I was taking. As I sat alone in that bridal suite, prenup in hand, everything started making sense. The comments about my work, the jokes about my failed business attempts, the timing of this document, even David's offer to take care of us financially. They hadn't just been dismissive of my success, they'd been strategically dismissive. They'd created a narrative where I was the financially dependent partner so that when the time came, they could swoop in and control everything. But here's what they hadn't counted on. I'd hidden my success so well that they had no idea what they were actually dealing with. My phone buzzed. A notification from my business bank account. A client payment had just hit. $2.3 million. While I was sitting in my wedding dress, holding a prenup that painted me as someone who needed financial protection, I was literally earning more money than most people see in a lifetime. The irony was so sharp it was almost funny. Almost. I had 2 options. Option 1, sign the prenup, go through with the wedding, and reveal my financial situation afterward. Watch as the dynamic completely shifted. Watch as David and his family suddenly became very interested in my little business. Watch as love transformed into dollar signs. Option 2, walk away. Right now. 2 hours before my wedding. In front of 200 guests. From a man I'd thought I was going to spend my life with. Neither option felt right, but one felt honest. I stood up, smoothed my dress, and walked to the door. Patricia was waiting in the hallway, tapping her foot impatiently. "So?" she asked. I handed her back the folder. "I'm not signing this." Her face hardened. "Excuse me?" I said, "I'm not signing it. If David wants a prenup, he can ask me himself. Like an adult. without the manipulation and pressure tactics. Manipulation? I'm trying to protect my son. From what exactly? From someone who supposedly has nothing to offer financially. She opened her mouth, then closed it. For the first time in all the years I'd known her, Patricia was speechless. 20 minutes before our ceremony was scheduled to start, I found David in the groom's suite. He was adjusting his tie, looking nervous and excited and completely unaware that his world was about to implode. "We need to talk," I said. He turned, saw my expression, and his face fell. "What's wrong? You look. Did you know about the prenup?" Silence. His face went through several emotions in rapid succession: confusion, recognition, panic. My mother mentioned she might. "So you did know?" "Not exactly. She said she was going to talk to you about some paperwork, but I didn't." "David, stop. Just stop." I pulled out my phone and showed him the notification. The $2.3 million payment. His eyes widened. "What is this?" "This is my reality. This is what I've been building while your family has been making jokes about my failed business attempts. This is what your mother was trying to protect you from." I watched his face change as understanding dawned. The confusion. The calculation. The recalibration of everything he thought he knew about me. "How much?" he whispered. "Does it matter?" "I mean, how long have you been? How much are we talking about here?" And there it was. The question that told me everything I needed to know. "We're talking about $17 million, David. $17 million that I built while you were offering to take care of me financially. While your mother was questioning whether I could contribute to the household. While your friends were joking about helping me find something more stable." He sat down heavily. 17. Jesus. Why didn't you tell me? "Because I wanted to know who you really were. And now I do." "That's not fair. You lied to me." "I protected myself. There's a difference." The silence stretched between us. Outside, I could hear the wedding planner talking to guests, explaining that there might be a slight delay. "So what happens now?" he asked. I looked at this man I'd thought I was going to marry. This man who, 30 seconds ago, had been more concerned about the dollar amount than about why I'd felt the need to hide it. "Now I go home. You explain to your guests." And we both dodged the biggest bullet of our lives. Walking out of that venue in my wedding dress was the hardest thing I'd ever done. 200 people. Thousands of dollars in deposits. A relationship I'd invested 3 years of my life in. But as I drove home, still in my wedding dress, something interesting happened. Instead of feeling devastated, I felt light. Like I'd been holding my breath for months and could finally exhale. My phone was buzzing constantly. David. Patricia. My maid of honor. Wedding guests who'd heard rumors and wanted to know what was happening. I turned it off and sat in my apartment, still in my wedding dress, eating leftover Chinese takeout and processing what had just happened. I'd almost married someone who saw me as a financial dependent. Someone whose family viewed me as a burden to be managed rather than a partner to be respected. Someone who, when faced with the truth about my success, immediately calculated what it meant for him rather than understanding what it meant for us. Over the next few weeks, as the dust settled and the story spread through our social circles, I learned some fascinating things. David's friends reached out, suddenly very interested in my business. Patricia called, wanting to work things out and suggesting that maybe I'd been too hasty. Even David himself tried multiple times to reconcile, with grand gestures and promises that things would be different. But here's what I realized: my instinct to hide my success hadn't been paranoia. It had been protection. It had been the smartest thing I'd ever done. Because now I knew, beyond any doubt, what I was worth to these people. And it had nothing to do with love. The silver lining. 6 months later, I was at a tech conference in Austin. My company had just secured another major contract, and I was feeling pretty good about life. Single, successful, and finally free to be completely honest about both. That's where I met Joseph. Joseph was a software engineer who'd built his own company. When I told him what I did, his response wasn't to calculate what it meant for him. It wasn't to question why I'd been secretive before. It was simply, "That's incredible. How did you identify that market need?" We talked for 3 hours about code, about business challenges, about the weird isolation that comes with success you can't share. He understood the pressure of building something significant while everyone around you treats you like you're playing games on your laptop. When I told him about the wedding story, he didn't see it as a cautionary tale about trust. He saw it as a masterclass in self-protection. "You didn't almost make a mistake," he said. "You almost fell into a trap. There's a difference." A year later, Joseph and I were planning our own wedding. But this one was different. This one was built on complete honesty, mutual respect, and the understanding that we were both successful individuals choosing to build something together. No prenups written in secret. No family members making assumptions about financial contributions. No pressure to scale back or find something more stable. Just two people who understood that real love doesn't require you to make yourself smaller to make someone else comfortable. The business continued to grow. By the time Joseph and I got married, it was valued at over $30 million. But more importantly, I was valued for who I was, not what I had. Looking back now, I realize that day in the bridal suite was never really about David or Patricia or even the prenup. It was about something much bigger. It was about the way women's success is often viewed as threatening rather than impressive. It was about the way we're expected to downplay our achievements to make others comfortable. It was about the way financial independence in women is treated as something that needs to be managed, controlled, or contained. I think about all the successful women who've made themselves smaller to preserve relationships, who've hidden their achievements to avoid making partners feel inadequate, who've accepted being underestimated because challenging those assumptions felt too risky. What if we stopped doing that? What if we stopped protecting other people from our success? From a business perspective, that almost wedding taught me something crucial about partnerships of any kind. The people who are right for you, whether in business or in life, aren't threatened by your success. They're inspired by it. In the years since, I've applied this principle to every business relationship. Clients who try to minimize my expertise or negotiate down my rates based on assumptions about my overhead or desperation. Gone. Partners who want to reshape my business to fit their comfort level rather than understanding what makes it successful. Next. The same instinct that told me not to sign that prenup now guides every major business decision. If someone's trying to pressure me into something that doesn't feel right, if they're making assumptions about my position or my options, if they're creating artificial urgency to prevent me from thinking clearly, those are red flags, not opportunities. You might be wondering what happened with my own family through all of this. Unlike David's family, mine had always been supportive, even when they didn't fully understand what I was building. When I finally told them the full scope of my success, their reaction was pure joy and pride. No calculations. No sudden changes in behavior. Just, "We always knew you were special, but this is incredible." My mother's response was my favorite. "I wondered why you never seemed stressed about money like other young people. Now it makes sense." It was such a contrast to David's family's reaction that it highlighted just how toxic that dynamic had been. Real love celebrates your success. It doesn't try to control it or benefit from it or minimize it. After David, I developed a completely different approach to dating. Instead of hiding my success, I started using it as a filter. Not in a flashy way, I wasn't showing up to first dates in designer everything or talking about my bank account over appetizers. But I stopped pretending to be less than I was. I talked honestly about my work, my travel, my goals. I let my success be visible. You'd be amazed how quickly this separated the wheat from the chaff. Guys who were intimidated by successful women revealed themselves immediately. Men who were looking for financial dependency showed their hands early. But the right kind of person, someone like Joseph, was attracted to ambition, impressed by achievement, and excited about building something together rather than building something off of me. Today, my company is valued at over $50 million. Joseph and I have been married for 2 years, and we've built something beautiful together, both in business and in life. We're partners in every sense of the word. Sometimes I get messages from women who've heard my story and find themselves in similar situations. They're successful but hiding it. They're dating someone whose family makes them feel small. They're being pressured into financial arrangements that don't feel right. My advice is always the same: trust your instincts. Your success isn't something that needs to be managed or controlled by other people. The right person will celebrate it, not try to contain it. The wedding story has had unexpected consequences over the years. It's become something of a legend in my industry circles. The woman who walked away from her wedding because she trusted her gut about a prenup. But more importantly, it's become a teaching tool. I've spoken at conferences about entrepreneurship, about women in business, about the unique challenges of building wealth while female. And this story always resonates. Because it's not really about the money. It's about knowing your worth and refusing to accept less than you deserve, whether that's in business or in life. Sometimes I play the what-if game. What if I had signed that prenup? What if I had gone through with the wedding? I probably would have revealed my financial situation during the honeymoon, or maybe a few months later when it became impossible to hide. David and Patricia's attitude would have changed overnight. Suddenly, my little business would have become very interesting to them. But here's the thing, that change in attitude would have been based on what I had, not who I was. And I would have spent the rest of my marriage wondering whether they loved me or loved my bank account. Instead, I get to wake up every day next to someone who fell in love with my ambition before he knew about my net worth. Someone who supports my dreams because he believes in me, not because he benefits from me. That's worth more than $17 million. That's worth more than $50 million. That's priceless. If there's one thing I want people to take away from this story, it's this: your instincts about people are usually right, especially when something feels off about money, power, or control. That gut feeling that told me not to tell David's family about my company? That was my subconscious picking up on signals that my conscious mind was trying to rationalize away. The dismissive comments, the assumptions about my financial situation, the pressure to find something more stable, these weren't innocent misunderstandings. They were reveals of true character. When Patricia walked into that bridal suite with a prenup and a notary stamp, she thought she was being clever. She thought she was catching me at my most vulnerable moment, when I'd be too emotional and pressed for time to think clearly. What she actually did was give me the gift of absolute clarity about what I was walking into. Today, 3 years later, I feel nothing but gratitude for that moment in the bridal suite. For Patricia's overreach. For David's true nature revealing itself. For my own instincts being strong enough to protect me when my heart wanted to ignore the red flags. That prenup saved my life. Not because signing it would have ruined me financially. I had enough money to survive any divorce settlement. But because going through with that wedding would have cost me something much more valuable: my self-respect. I almost told them about my $17 million company. Thank God I didn't. Because in keeping that secret, I learned the most important lesson of my life. The right people don't need to know what you're worth to know that you're valuable. And that knowledge? That's worth everything.